All right, so good morning, folks. My name is Tashana Johnson. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a program manager with the Whole You, which is your well-being and engagement program. Today, we'll be talking about mental health and specifically loneliness and how to navigate it during this time of year. I chose this as a topic as mental health is really near and dear to my heart. And I hope we can have more conversations about it, building our collective awareness and our ability to connect with each other. So with that in mind, please do participate in today's session as you're able to. You're welcome to drop questions into the chat, use reaction buttons, or share what feels okay to be shared. Again, we'll be recording today's session, so keep that in mind, that everyone's story is their own. Do take care of yourselves, take breaks as you need to. We'll be here. And again, thank you all for being here. And please help me welcome Shinshin Day. I'll let her introduce herself, and then we'll kind of go back and forth throughout this call. Thank you. Welcome, Shinshin.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Shinshin Dai. I am a therapist, and that's okay. I think most people don't know how to say my name one way or the other. I'm a therapist and assistant director at the UW Counseling Center in Seattle campus. I've been working at UW for the past 4 years, and before that, I was working at a community mental health agency working with adults. I really enjoy supporting clients moving through life transition, difficult times, and also coming to terms with painful experience, also relationship issues, and just really want to empower people to practice, especially like practice self-compassion and ways to take care of yourself and how to improve your well-being and move through life in a way that you want to. And I'm really passionate about social justice, mental health advocacy. I'm interested in working with multicultural issues, anxiety, depression, trauma, and grief and loss, shame, and intersectionality. Throughout, we all have different identities, and our different identities shows up in ways in the world that serve or disserve us in many different ways. So I love talking about and helping people with that. Personally, I love cooking. I'm taking Duolingo right now and learning 3 different languages. It's a way to keep myself occupied. I also really like eating. So yeah, thank you all so much for being here. And I also love plants. I have many plants at home and try not to kill them, but seems to be doing better with that. But thank you again for being here. Just want to name that I am also really anxious right now. I have never done something like this before, and especially it's being recorded and available. So thank you all being here, and appreciate you embracing if I make any mistakes or stumble through my words. So yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Shinshin. And let's just have try to keep your plants healthy and alive. That's a separate seminar in the future. I need to attend that myself.
Yes.
The animals are doing great though, we're good. And thank you for, sharing a bit about yourself and also how you're showing up in today's space. I think it's really important that we kind of name the experience we're having. I'd love for us to start with kind of talking a little bit about just general mental health before tapping into getting into specifics around loneliness. Just kind of introducing the water that we are kind of swimming in. What are some important what are some things that might come up around the holidays or this time of year? I know for me, the holiday, this time of year, it's really challenging on my mental health, or my mental health is already challenged. I'm not sure. The pandemic is also happening, right? What are some things that maybe you see in your practice, or some reasoning around why the holidays and this time of year might be stimulating?
Yeah, of course. So holiday times is a busy time, and I think a lot of times what makes it so hard for people are just generally there's a lack of time, because you got to show up to these gatherings, or sort of expected to show up and be there and connect, and also the pressure of gifting, especially Christmas time, right? This has been such a long tradition of Christmas, you gift people things as a way of Mary that sharing Marys and whatnot, but not everybody actually has this sort of financial capacity to do that. And also thinking about what people want, and it can be really overwhelming. And on top of it, when we gather with families, sometimes some people might not actually have families that's close by, or actually are emotionally or close to their family. So it could kind of trigger and sort of like bring up this sense of like, do I have anybody? And that can be and feel really sad, and create definitely like a sense of like this on topic loneliness. And last but not least, like grief and loss. What it's a big time of reminding people of the people that we have lost and the lack of the present that they have in our life. And so, yeah, it can be really hard on people.
Yeah, I witness, a lot of that, especially around grief and loss, not only of people, but time and different things connected to the pandemic. Um, can we talk a little bit about grief?
Sure.
And I folks, for transparency, I did send some of these questions over to Shinshin before, so we might be jumping around a little bit. But I think that's okay. I wonder if we can talk a little bit about grief and, what is that experience like, or what are you seeing? What's kind of that experience like, and even some ways that we might support ourselves in grief during this time of year.
Yeah, grief is one of those strange feeling that we get, like this like sort of like mourning and this sense of loss and really missing someone, and sadness and a little bit like a heaviness that we carry, and sometimes it feels like we're completely alone in it, and sometimes actually we are, right? Because people and maybe our friends don't experience the same thing, and so they can't fully understand what it's like to lose that somebody or something that we love so much, right? Or maybe, I mean, I'll get into grief is a whole other different topic. And there's also grief around like what we didn't have, or even grief of like, family that we wish we had, or sort of like, or somebody even hurt us, right? That we can experience grief. But yeah, and it can really, not only holiday times, but like even just normal times, it just comes and goes, and holiday can definitely heighten a sense of grief of like missing this person. And in terms of like taking care of ourselves, I think it really just kind of naming like, yeah, I'm experiencing grief, like I'm really feeling in my feels of grieving and missing these people and these connections, maybe, or the memories that we had or didn't have, or that wish we had. And I think truly just honoring like our feelings and being with them and sharing with them can be really helpful with people that you trust, or kind of you feel okay to share with, so then people can at least temporarily witness and kind of carry that with you temporarily, so you're not completely alone in holding that. And in terms of like, how do I express that in this really heightened time of holiday? It can be really helpful in actually engage in some kind of tradition to honor the ones that you miss and you love. Like whether it's cooking something, that a meal that they like to cook, or that you really enjoy that they have made before, or in activities that you enjoy doing together with them, or that they liked, and just feel bringing that memory, or even talking about them, can be really helpful. And just remember this person, like it's okay to remember and feel sadness and missing this person. And another thing is like, it's also, we can get into like, sometimes we feel guilty for feeling happy, right? And like we should feel like this expectation of feeling around like, oh, I should be grieving, I'm sad I lost this person. But maybe there's a certain things that you feel really joy and happy, or different feelings about, like that's okay. There's a lot of emotions that goes along with all of this. So really just be tender with yourself and allow yourself to welcome all these different things that could come up for you, and allow support when it shows up, and reach out.
I love that so much. And like, there was so much, and I think I might keep myself off of mute if that's okay. So that's more.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do.
Not gets lost in virtual rooms, right? It was so beautiful what you're saying, especially around like naming feelings and naming emotions. that might be new kind of terminology or new phrasing for folks. So can you share a little bit about like what that means, and maybe what some guidance for
Sure.
doing those types of things?
Yeah, I think it's in when we don't know like what we're feeling. I was like, I don't know what I'm feeling. It's like really helpful to tap in and checking how your body feels, or at least get in a space where you feel safe and kind of just understanding what is coming out for me. Like where is this feeling that's showing up in my body, or what am I thinking about? Right. And kind of through that can be helpful in understanding like, am I anxious or nervous about a situation or somebody or something that happened, or am I sad? And through that, sometimes we can, through this primary feelings, we can kind of dig in a little deeper. Even there's this like emotion feeling wheels that you can Google. It's beautifully made, and they kind of go from like this primary big feelings about anger, sadness, and
Yeah.
fear, or like anxiety, and it goes a little bit even deeper, like within the sadness, what is are you like feeling discouraged, or are you feeling like mourning, or are you yeah, just like, or is it a sense of shame,
Mhm.
guilt? What is this? So through looking at that, that can be helpful and kind of like, oh, that might be what's going on for me right there. And by naming that, it actually help us understand what we're feeling. And our feelings are here to show up, to help us kind of figure out like, what is going on? What do we need?
Yeah.
What is happening with us?
Totally, totally. I love the and I've seen a lot of versions, and maybe that can be one of the resources that will get sent out, but a lot of versions of the like emotion wheel or the feeling wheel, very colorful. Um, it reminds me of like when you go to the store or something and you see maybe like a 4-year-old having a big expression of feelings, right? A big expression of emotion, and knowing that there's something underneath those emotions, and like, aren't we all having um learning how what our feelings are and how to express them. um,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think yeah, you're sharing a lot of great stuff around acknowledging emotions and trying to understand them a bit more.
And it can also definitely be helpful in even like help us connect with others too, by understanding what we feel, we can communicate about what we want or need in our relationship. So you can get that met, or at least been heard and understood.
Hmm. Hmm. um, you were, I think you mentioned around like that our feelings are just giving us kind of information, or they're not necessarily good or bad things. um,
Mhm.
is that how you would describe loneliness? Or like, sometimes I'm afraid of loneliness. I'm afraid of my loneliness, right? I don't want to feel lonely. I see a lot of messages out there in society around um, trying to stay busy. And so I'm like, oh, loneliness must be a bad thing. Of course, I'm
Mhm.
in process on that a lot. But um,
Mhm.
can you share a little bit around loneliness, like how we might categorize or like understand it?
Yeah, yeah, I love what you just said too. I think there's something about to say about I'm afraid of my own loneliness, right? Like, what is that about? So there's something about loneliness we're afraid to tap in. And there's a lot around that. And so I heard this analogy beautifully recently through a podcast, and then it kind of break into loneliness into kind of two things. So I don't know if you heard of like the Rumi poem about like house guests, and it kind of basically talks about different emotions are guests and we're houses that comes through, and sometimes they come through and then they go, and then like bigger feelings like shame, guilt, anger comes in and kind of like really disrupt us. So anyways, loneliness, one kind of loneliness is like they call it like the good guest.
Hmm.
And the good guest kind of shows up just more temporarily, like kind of, hey man, like, or hey, how are you doing? Like, how are you feeling about your relationships? How are you feeling about how you connected you are to the people around you or the things around you? Checking in, and then that's a good time, and maybe like it's helpful for you to reflect and like, ooh, like how am I doing? Do I need to get out there and maybe connect with people in different ways where that feels more meaningful for me? And then there's kind of like the rude guest of the rude loneliness, where
Hmm.
they come in and they're like, no, we're not doing this. So then when people come and check in on you and the loneliness comes like, no, 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 we're not doing this. We are feeling too much. It's a way of protection, but instead is this loneliness just camp in and it just won't leave. And it ended up can make us feel like we feel like this sense of like wanting to connect with people, but it's hard to. And then that also can change our perception, start to change our perception around like how we feel about ourselves and other people in our life too. Like,
Sure. Yeah. The expression or that's such a beautiful analogy. And I also, right, that resonates, the experience of, and you said it earlier also with grief, like feeling alone in the experience. And loneliness is so interesting because you were also mentioning how there's like, sometimes you have the want to connect and it's just not there. So is loneliness about connection? Is it about connecting with others or yourself, or or is it a mixed bag?
That's a great question. And I do think that loneliness is kind of, whether it's connection or it's like a sense of self, like I think there's different phases of loneliness, right? Like different ways that it shows up for people. So there's like, through friendship, right? There's like, you can break into like 3 different kinds. So there's the chronic loneliness where you're like, that really just embedded into you being alone completely. And being alone and feeling lonely are actually very different things. Like there's that sort of sense of solitude that you choose to be alone, and actually can be empowering of like, I claim my time and space to myself versus like I am completely helpless and I don't feel like I'm connected to in the world or anybody at all. And then there's the category of like, you have few friends that you can reach out to, but but then when party time comes, that you don't know who to actually invite, or if you need help with something, like who do I call to help me move, or maybe
right, that's where
like,
all of my friends disappear.
Yeah, or like
I only have 5, but like they're gone.
Yeah. Right. So
Right.
that could kind of be like that sense of loneliness, right? And then there's that kind where like you have a lot of friends,
Right.
but then like when you really need it, maybe you're feeling vulnerable or sad or depressed or feeling grief and you need some, like don't know what to do, you don't know who to call.
Right.
That sense of like deep connection or sort of vulnerability, maybe you're not sure who has that or where to share that.
Yeah. It's almost like almost like you're not sure if anyone has capacity to like be with you in that space, which also can feel really lonely.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, you were talking a little bit, it was like boundaries were coming up a little bit in what you were sharing just now. I wonder if you might share, and boundaries can be new language as well, for folks, or a new expression. If you talk a little bit about boundaries and maybe what that means for mental health and what that means for connection, to the extent that you're able to.
Yeah, so boundaries really just kind of about, boundaries are there to help you. It's for you. It's not for other people. It's your own boundaries, right? So boundaries are show up as a way to take care of yourself and for you to know what your limits are and what you're okay and not okay with, instead of like kind of neglecting what we need or what we want in order to meet other people, to compensate for other people. And how you will, and boundaries are kind of like how you will protect them. So when you express or communicate boundaries, it's like for instance, it's holiday season, right? And people, maybe your family is like, I want you to come in town to visit, but you're like, I'm really just kind of want to stay here and do something low key with my friends. But maybe historically, you just kind of like, oh, I don't want to disappoint or upset anybody or have conflicts. So, well, I guess I'll show up, right? So,
right.
setting boundary would sound like, communicating like, hey, thank you for the invite. And I know that we kind of been doing this many years, but this year I really think I just want to stay in town and do something small. But in the future, I would still like to be invited. And I really appreciate the invite, but I would still like to be invited, but just not this year. So thank you.
Yeah, I love that because it's a way of like being honest with yourself and honoring what's coming up for you. And then, sorry, you all, Matza has left. My dog has left the room.
Darn.
She's like, boundaries, I have none. She just ran away. Best dog ever. But it's a way of being honest with yourself and also and sharing where you're at with other people. And that it's not that you have hope for like connecting another time. It's just not right now.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah, I think that's some really important stuff.
mhm.
Um, so I want to pause for a question that's come up that's related to what we were just talking about around kind of the different categories of loneliness of folks that prefer to want to be alone, and it's kind of it's that empowering space. And I might get the wording wrong, folks. I'm going to get wording wrong. That's okay. But it's that empowering space. It's other spaces as well. Is it okay, like not wanting or not liking to be physically alone? Is that normal? And I guess as well, is it normal to feel loneliness?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely okay to not want to be alone. It's completely normal. We're humans, we're social animals. We want to be connected, we want to be around others, and we want to be touched,
Mhm.
that's okay. And in terms of is it normal to feel lonely? Yes, yes, absolutely. I mean, different loneliness can be situational or sort of like circumstantial, or it could be something that's more prolonged, like maybe something that you just don't feel connected to your family. And I just kind of, but families are families, right? So you kind of have this ongoing reminders of what's coming up, and like I don't feel connected to them. What do I,
Mhm.
and that kind of definitely continue to remind us of we're alone feels like, in
Sure,
terms of family dynamics. But and that can be really helpful. It's a time to remind yourself, like, what about friends or chosen families?
sure. Yeah, absolutely. I hear the expression of like you can be lonely around people, even when you're around people, and especially maybe it's stimulated by certain folks in our worlds.
Mhm.
Um, that kind of brings up like dealing with triggers or like coping with folks. Um, do you have any kind of like self-care practices that you'd like to share? You can share around how to cope when maybe maybe we aren't able to express that boundary of I'm not able to show up this year. Maybe we do end up going to those events or those connection points. Um, how can we kind of take care of ourselves in those moments?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, so you love it when you gotta have to do this thing and know that maybe something's gonna like stress you out or make you
Mhm.
anxious.
Yeah.
So something that can be really helpful is actually kind of like prepare ahead of the time, like kind of reflect back on like historically what about the situation or this group of people or the setting that triggers me,
Mhm.
and understand the source. And once you understand the source, and also kind of be aware of like, okay, when I'm triggered, how does that feel for me? What does that look like? Do I kind of just really shut down, or do I feel anxious and just sweating the whole time,
Mhm.
depending on where I
Right.
am? And so really kind of understand what you might go into and kind of prepare ahead of the time. Maybe like what are some tools and ways that I can take care of myself in that moment. And now
Mhm.
we're there, right? So maybe that's through like removing yourself from that person, or that environment, or practicing deep breathings
Mhm.
in the moment. Really get back and just focusing on your breathing instead of like into your thoughts, or breathing and feelings. And there's this really great kind of mindfulness exercise I share with people all the time. It's called 5 4 3 2 1. I don't know if
Mhm.
you've heard of that. But it's basically just like a really simple mindfulness exercise in the moment that, you name 5 things that you see just to yourself, and you can totally like remove yourself from the situation. Maybe just take a seat and just like have it, and just be there and like observe your surrounding. 5 things that you see, four
Sure.
things that you can touch,
Mhm.
3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. And it's
Mhm.
okay if you like can't find something to taste in the moment, but just really
Right.
kind of the idea of like using all of your senses to
Sure.
get grounded and
Mhm.
like in the moment again. So like self-soothe.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that practice. I've heard of that practice, and my own therapist has shared with me that practice. And I have times when I'm in very like highly elevated moments, and I'm just like, how many things am I supposed to hear? Right?
It doesn't have to, yeah.
Whatever, one of everything, right? Because there's just I know for me, my brain kind of like overpowers itself. And so I'm just like, okay, so for me, I think the like practicing deep breathing is always what I come back to. And it's also that reminder that like every person's like care and coping strategy, it's going to be different and unique to them. Right.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
really mostly important to figure out what works for you.
Hmm.
And that might be kind of, it takes exploring and
Yeah.
practicing to see what works, and sometimes
Totally.
talking with a friend, or even if you get a therapist and talk about what comes up for you, what are those strategies that might be more helpful for you.
Mhm.
um
Mhm.
so, and kind of like what you were saying, like when you're actually in the moment, you don't remember what's 5 things that what 5 things at a touch,
Right.
like what, like it really just about like remembering to use your senses.
Totally, totally. Yeah. And yeah, and trying like these different practices on, and also leaving them behind, just find the dog and the cheese plate, right? Like
Yep.
those are
Just
two.
pet, 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 pet. That's all you can do.
Right. My cat she's right behind the laptop now. So if you're seeing my screen move, it's because she's napping and being herself. Uh, can you repeat the 5-4-3 expression, please?
Yeah, of course. So it's 5 things that you see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things that you hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste.
Yeah.
But do
Yeah.
whatever is available, or sort of like that's actually like makes the most sense for your sense. Like for me, I like to touch interesting textures, like pillows with interesting textures, and like tasting and smelling things. Yeah, that
Yeah.
kind of
Oh
fluffy
gosh.
pillows, right? Like
Yeah, definitely.
um yeah, and I also sometimes when I'm really anxious or stressed out, like I definitely get hot and sweaty. My hands start feeling kind of like hot, right? Like everything
Mhm.
feels hot. So like actually grabbing like a cold drink and just hold it.
Mhm.
So regulate, kind of like understand how your body might be feeling in the moment. Like when you're,
Right.
also when you're stressed out or like again anxious or upset,
Yeah.
stepping outside for some cold fresh air can really help you kind of like regulate your body temperature, and also kind of get you in a new space too.
Yeah. I one of my favorite tips is to take like a cold washcloth, like run a washcloth
Mhm,
or a towel under water, or take like an ice cube and put it
mhm,
behind my neck,
mhm.
uh, like under my hairline, because it's just like instead of focusing on what's going on in my brain, now I can focus on like the sensations that are coming up with the
Yeah,
ice, right? That kind of cold temperature.
yes.
Um, I love these. I love we're just going. We're just
Yeah,
doing.
I mean, there's so many more, but I will just throw a couple here.
It. So you mentioned mindfulness earlier, which I do feel can also be new language for folks, or we're still trying to understand what mindfulness is. Sometimes it's shared about in ways that aren't necessarily accessible. Can you talk a little bit about what mindfulness is and how it kind of plays a role into taking care of ourselves or
Yeah,
others?
yeah. So mindfulness is, I think a lot of times people like kind of connect mindfulness with like meditation. You just sit there for 2 hours and you don't think
Mhm.
about anything. Like that's actually, so mindfulness is really just about gently the practice of gently focusing your attention awareness
Mhm.
to this present moment again and again and again.
Mhm.
That's really it.
Right.
And there's no like I get good at, I mean, you sometimes it gets easier by practicing for a long time, but you don't need to be like good at being
Mhm.
mindful, right? So it's
Mhm.
really kind of just what you were talking about earlier, Tashwana, like when you just like kind of even grab some ice grab an ice cube. In this moment, you feel the sensation. That's a mindfulness exercise. You know,
Mhm.
I bet everybody here has done some sort of mindfulness already that we just didn't realize. And when you go for a walk, you're just
Right.
listening to the birds or looking at the trees,
Mhm.
all just like in the present moment, you're just
Mhm.
looking at that. That's
Mhm.
mindfulness.
Yeah. The one of my favorite like analogies, like the opposite of mindfulness, like we also might be aware of or practiced, right? And it's neither one of these are, they're not bad things. They are just things, right? But it's like scrolling on the phone while eating food,
Mhm.
right? Or my personal favorite, looking for something to watch on TV while eating food, and I'm like, oh no, I can't get started on the food until I have the thing on the TV.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. Or just checking in with ourselves in between meetings and tasks. Um, and I think, a lot of us as humans, we've had the experience of like being hungry, going into a meeting or leaving a meeting and not being able to go to the bathroom and getting into the next one. Um, or just eating a piece of like cold rotisserie chicken, like for lunch, like that's all we have time for, right? Because I want to make space for the people that just need to eat the cold rotisserie chicken, like myself.
Yeah.
That some days are going to be different and
Yeah.
some places are going to be different. Um, I really appreciate that. And learning to kind of hold compassion for whatever is going on. And compassion, of course, is also some new language. Can you talk about maybe specifically like self-compassion and like what that looks like and
Yeah.
why that's important?
Yeah, absolutely. So compassion really is just more, it's like the act of empathy. So the action side of empathy. We feel empathy for people and things in the world. And when we're compassion, we act on sort of like helping this person elevating or this thing elevating their suffering. So self-compassion is directing that compassion towards ourselves. So that's kind of like treating ourselves as we would treating a friend that we just love dearly. And when they're experiencing pain, suffering,
Mhm.
we want to be there and do everything we can to help them feel better. And that's exactly that, but with ourselves.
Right, right. Or with how it is like with our dog, but with ourselves. I'm not
Yeah,
it,
or dog, or
yeah, or
whatever
dogs.
thing that you love.
Whatever it is that that brings you that most space of empathy and joy and connection.
Mhm.
Um, I love right now, and I know I'm trying to figure it out right now, and I know a lot of folks are as well. Um, like social media has made it very easy for us to connect with um, our family, our friends, others that may are our online friends or community, and it feels like it's been such a gift in some ways, but it also feels like it can be really challenging, not only for mental health, but specifically like loneliness and yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that, or like how folks might navigate it? And I think that also goes back to the
Oh my
boundaries.
gosh, social media. It's
Oh
just
my,
like
I
a
know.
blessing and a
I
curse in
had
our
to ask
world.
you
It's
though.
like right. We want to see like how our friends are doing, but at the same time, you scroll through and then see how people like are talking about how great the life
Sure.
seems, and then
Mhm.
and it makes you aware of like, oh, I don't feel like my life is like this, or like I am like this. So then you want to do everything you can, like maybe I'll do this to as a way to prove, but then that's really just a reflection of like
Sure.
competing or comparing, right? And that's not coming from that place of like I genuinely, authentically feel great and about my life without, kind of like in reflection of others,
Right.
right? So sorry, what was the question? I got
That's
distracted.
okay. No, yeah, I know. Like we could, that's a whole other, right? It's like, oh, now we're just talking about the gift and the curse of social media.
Uh-huh,
Um,
uh-huh.
are
Oh,
there
how do we
like,
take care of
yeah,
ourselves
are
with,
there
oh
ways that
yeah, yeah,
we can navigate it a little bit differently or more supportive
yeah,
ways we can
yes.
navigate?
Yes, there are a couple things. I think it's really important to remember like social media. Just one thing that we need to remind ourselves and remember is that social media, what shows up, it's only like a fraction
Mhm.
of what somebody's life is.
Mhm.
And I know it's super hard to remember and especially in the moment, but it's really important to remember that. And then second, like, especially maybe like during holidays, you want to keep up with people. If the intention is to keep up with people, what other outlets that you can do that? Is it through
Mhm.
messaging them, like texting or calling? It's like, hey, how are you doing? I'm thinking about you, instead of like going into social media, look like, what are they up to? Because you might kind of stumble upon, like, especially Instagram these days, it's like it shows everything. Like it's not even things that you care about
Yeah.
anymore, right? And
Yeah, it's
so
true.
yeah, so it's kind of like when we talk about boundaries, it's like you set boundary with others, but also with it can be with yourself as well. So kind of make a commitment
Yeah,
of this boundary with yourself. Like I know when I look at Instagram or Facebook or other social media, it makes me feel
right.
really bad, especially, during holiday, it can be really hard already. Maybe
Sure.
by the time that I go on it, or a limited amount of time, or numbers of time that you go on there.
Hmm.
So you can really take care of yourself because you
Hmm.
deserve to feel good about you too.
Hmm. Yeah. I feel that a lot of what you're talking about, yeah, it's like it's mindfulness and it's intentionality with like social media and what are we going on for? How long do we want to spend the time? What accounts are we seeing versus who do we want to block? Right? Maybe if they're it's content that doesn't feed us or fuel us.
Mhm, mhm.
And I I also know from myself and my practice, I feel like my boundaries are like ongoing work, right? Especially with social media and a lot of other things. um there will be days, right, especially towards the beginning of the pandemic, or especially
Mhm,
like 2 weeks ago, where I was like just in a real hole, right, like just scrolling, um and then had and needed to like notice like, oh, it's been a minute, right, I haven't got up to go like eat first
yeah,
thing in the morning. That was not working great.
yeah.
um, and so I know for myself, I've created some of those practices around social media. I'm like, okay, 10 minutes with the happy lamp on, just
Yeah.
looking at funny dog content. I am that person who's looking at funny dog content to get myself like started in the morning. But yeah,
Mhm.
the rules are it's ongoing work. Um,
Absolutely. And there's no like a perfect place you need to be or never. And I mean, if you delete your Instagram, whatever, like you want to do, good for you, but if you don't want to, and that just kind of learn ways to like continue moving through it. There's never
mhm,
gonna be times I'm perfectly, you know,
sure.
doing well with Instagram. And then probably gonna be times that they are, but there's gonna be
Mhm,
times that maybe not, right?
mhm,
Really just depending on how you're feeling, what's going on in life. And so
mhm.
giving yourself lots of grace
Yeah.
around that too. And I
Oh, I
think
love that.
with
Yeah.
Instagram, there's actually maybe a function that you can like set like alert on how many
Mhm.
minutes you've been here, or like they will be like, you've been here for
Yeah.
15-30 minutes already. Maybe it's time to
Not the
get
screen
off.
time alerts. Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, okay, but thanks, but no thanks. I'm gonna keep going. So
We're not using that information today. I do not receive it.
that's okay. And that's okay.
Yeah. I hear you. I hear you. But also like, and coming back to like loneliness, and especially during the holidays, like really kind of checking in with yourself um as you're going on social media, and like asking how you feel when you're doing that, and what are the practices that can make you feel better, or at least, or sometimes just neutral. Like sometimes feeling great uh isn't within reach, but feeling like neutral um can feel within reach. So I really appreciate that you were bringing that up.
Mhm.
um how are we doing, folks? Can we get a thumbs up, or like in the virtual space or in the chat box? Are you all still with us? Are you on our tea date with us?
Also, welcome any questions or sort of like reflection. Happy to hear more about how you're all doing, or any sort of
Yeah.
like thoughts that you're coming up for you as well.
And then are there any kind of ideas for alone time, or what that kind of looks like?
Mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. I think like there's definitely like ambiguous grief too outside of like death. I think like divorce, breakup, losing a friendship, or
Mhm.
just not having the same thing, that's definitely a big it's grief as well. And I think in terms of alone times, really think about or reflect on what would be something that's meaningful for you. What do you need? What would be something that feels good for you? Like, I mean, if you want to just be at home and watch Netflix and do nothing,
Right.
that's
Yeah.
okay. Or if you
Mhm.
want to, go on a hike by yourself, or maybe go on like rent a little cabin in the woods and read for the night and just be by yourself, that's okay too. Like
Mhm.
whatever it is that really like nourish your soul and
Mhm.
tend to your heart during this hard time, and especially with all the changes and the kind of this loss or sort of change in life and chaos
Sure.
happen.
Sure.
And so, and really kind of just also hold space for yourself to feel all the feelings, and whether it's by yourself or kind of with a friend or a therapist, and just
Mhm.
really have space to process that and allow that to be there.
Mhm.
As you were reading, I'm like already feeling, I'm like kind of tearing up. So
Yeah.
I hear you, I feel
Yeah.
you, I'm here for you. I'm
Yeah.
holding space and I'm holding you all in my heart and my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm going to make an executive decision. Right now, this is not related to what was just shared, but um, so in usually with our events, sorry folks, I'll come back into the questions in just a minute. Uh,
Mhm.
with our events, we usually record and then we share the recording with folks that have registered for the event, and we also put it on our YouTube channel, the Whole Youth YouTube channel, so you can access later. So one of the practices that in case this is helpful for anyone, I knew I wanted to cry. I knew I wanted to feel the things, but I felt like I didn't have time to. I was working, I was taking care of like the animals, taking care of myself, trying to take care of myself. And so I started a tradition of Sad Girl Saturday.
I love it.
I would go to the store, I would get some ice cream, and then I would draw a bath and I would eat ice cream in the bathtub and I would just cry. I had scheduled cry sessions
Yeah,
to just like, and if I didn't feel
love
like,
it.
it didn't all have to be related to relationship stuff. I could look at like, I would have like scheduled watch sad video time, right? To kind of let that stuff come out. So I just want to, and someone also dropped that into the chat, not that specific example, but trying to think of opportunities to start a new tradition or a new way of celebrating with yourself or
Yes,
feeling all the things. Yeah, Sad Girl Saturday was a hit for me.
love it.
Okay, give me a second, folks, as I'm reading a question. Grab some water, take a sip, do what you need to do. Okay. This is kind of related to our boundaries talk earlier, especially as for someone who is like a highly sensitive person, and folks tend to come to them to share. Um,
Mhm.
do you have any kind of helpful suggestions or strategies for how to say no to others in those situations without it being isolating or making it feel like they're being rejected. They
Mhm.
don't want others to struggle alone. At the same time, the cost can be too high for them as an individual. It's a really great question.
Mm. So is kind of setting boundary with somebody, but the fear of them feeling rejected and alone.
Like kind of how to communicate. Yeah, how to communicate and share those boundaries.
Yeah, I think um being able to just say like, hey, I see your effort, and it's not like a rejection of like right now this time, or I mean it really depends on what it is, but if it's like an event or some sort of like things that they're asking you to do, but that's just not within your boundary and capacity. I think just say I'm glad you reached out. This is just, I'm not able to do this. Maybe next time. And depending on what the situation is, it might be helpful, maybe redirect them to maybe something or somebody else that they might be able to get support or sort of like their needs or wants met. It really just depends on the situation.
Right.
I think, yeah, I think being sensitive, I get it. And at the same time, we can never actually control or prevent people to feel maybe disappointed or rejected. And we can do what we can, to be as gentle and as kind and sensitive towards them. But if people feel the sense of like, oh, you're rejecting me, and or I'm so disappointed that you did this, that's not on you. That's not on you. And I know it's hard to take
Right.
that, but like it really is not. You did everything that you could. That
Mhm.
that you're not responsible for people's feelings or reactions when you set boundaries.
Right.
Um people, and it sucks to see people suffer or sort of feel bad feelings or uncomfortable feelings, but it will be okay. They will be okay. And like you have we all have experienced disappointment, sort of fear and rejection. It hurts, it sucks, and we're so okay. So
Yeah.
remind yourself of that.
Mhm. And that there's and oh my gosh, we like got through all the questions, Shinjin.
I
There's
think
only one
so.
left, and this is like magically going right into it. I think it's the reminding ourselves that there is support available, and there's a lot of different support available. That there are resources to consider. Um, can you share a little bit about? And I'll be sending out a handout of a lot of the resources. And again, folks, I don't think we're going to put the recording up online. I'll be transcribing and sending out some of the strategies that were shared. But can we talk a little bit about resources and how we might connect to support, whether it's here within UW or within the community? Anything that kind of comes up for you there?
Yeah, I think with UW, I think kind of spaces like this, or even maybe depending on your department or sort of relationship you have with your coworkers, or even like other people that works at UW that you feel connected to. It's definitely like reaching out or find communities that, maybe shared interests or sort of
Mhm.
like things that you care about. And sorry, I got
That's
distracted
okay.
for a second. And then in terms of in the community, like if you want to find a therapist, like, you can look at the insurance that you have and look at who's in network, or even Googling who's available. It kind of depends on what kind of therapist you're looking for. And if you have no idea, that's okay. Just go on Psychology Today, type in your zip code and see what shows up and see if somebody stands out to you. That's where you can get started, and just kind of reach out and say, hey, these are the things I kind of want to talk about, or I need some support on. Are you able to help me? Are you available? And you can always kind of schedule like a 15-20 minute consultation call that's free, and to see how it feels talking about this person before you feel like you're signing up for
Yeah.
this commitment. And you can
Right.
always leave the
So
therapist. Like,
important.
that's
Like,
okay.
yeah, you can have a free mini session, not session necessarily, but like an interview style of like, is this the counselor for me?
Mhm.
You don't have to just accept the first one that comes. I'll also share and do a plug for UW CareLink as one of the resources available to employees and faculty and staff. That in addition to things like support finding legal services or finding childcare or older adult care, employees and anyone in their household. So it can be a roommate, it can be a partner, it can be an older adult parent or XYZ. It can't be a dog, a person within their household. I know I'm a cat. That's really important in terms of what you're looking for, and just making sure that you can get connected that way. So we'll be sharing some of those resources.
Does UW have sort of like EAP?
That's
I work here. I should know, but I don't know.
okay. That's okay. People have worked here for like, a long time and not a long time and somewhere in between. And I had a conversation with someone that was here for, 18 years, and I was telling them about CareLink, and it felt very new to them. And it makes sense. We have so much information and so many resources, and we're just trying to figure it all out, right? And get connected. So yes, that's their version of
That's what
EA.
it is. Okay, got it.
And then so much more. Um, Thank you, Shinshin. I want to just thank you so much for, and I want to be mindful of where we are on the hour. But thank you so much for showing up today and putting up with all the dad jokes and the dog jokes, and just the thoughtful ways that you've shared, and you were able to be here and be present. And to all of you as well, all of our attendees, thank you for this. Thank you for the questions that you brought, the things that you shared. We know that that's very personal to you, and we want to make sure that you know that that's held by you and by us here in space. Please do take care of yourselves, whatever that looks like, right? Knowing all attempts matter here, and every day is different.
Mhm.
Whew, okay, I was gonna say shake it off, and then I was gonna start singing Taylor Swift, but then it was like
Pick it up.
Mariah Carey, Shake It Off, and then Florence and the Machine. Okay, however you can, take care of yourselves, folks. I will be sending out transcript and resources within the next week or so. And yeah, we're here. Ravi, hey baby, we're here. Some of us more than others. Sorry, the kitten is chaotic. We're here. Please do reach out as questions or things come up. We will see you soon. Take good care,
Thank
folks.
you. Take good care, everybody. Thank you for being here.
Wonderful. Bye.
Bye.